Hello, Kevan McKenzie here with me today. I'm really happy that you were able to join me. Um,
My pleasure.
and it's always a pleasure connecting with friends who have kind of had their own paths of where they came from and where they went to. And you're, you're in Toronto right now, but tell for those of you who don't know Kevan McKenzie, he is one of the great drummers in Canada, and we come from a small town, both of us actually, from some years ago in Ottawa. I went to Montreal, he went to Toronto, and we both never looked back. Actually, I looked back a couple of times, and then I saw Kevin. Kevin, to me, was like always kind of like the Steve Gadd of Toronto. You know, he's a great player and the nicest person. But the what's
Wow.
really interesting is our own trajectories. Like you always ask the question, what gets us to certain places? What gets us to do the things we dreamt about, the things that we always wanted to do? And when we grow up, we get involved in musical projects. What takes us? Tell us a little bit about what was your path, and what are the things, the major points that you bring out?
Well, thank you for those kind words, Aldo. That's clearly way too kind because Steve Gadd is a god to all of us.
Yes.
But yeah, Steve Gadd became a hero of mine in like 1973 or something like that. I was kind of ahead of the curve, and I loved where what I heard in his playing, like all of us did. But I really related because I um, after I grew up in a family with there was no music, so it just came to me innately. I had to find my own path and playing in bands and stuff. And then I decided I wanted to study seriously, and I ended up at Ottawa U with Ian Bernard, percussionist for the Arts Center Orchestra, as my teacher, which is very fortuitous because Ian really defined how I play from way back then. Sitting down with a metronome, 40 BPM, Jacques Delacluse, which I have on my music stand right here.
You're still using that?
Never goes. Oh man, it never goes away.
Wow. It's
It's
funny.
it's
Let me just interject there. This
yeah,
is
sure.
a interesting story because Kevin and I actually had the same teacher at different times.
Yeah,
Because I also went to Ottawa U and studied with
yeah.
Ian, and before that, we both studied with. Now the name is escaping me. He had a studio up on the third floor.
In Ottawa,
Yes,
I didn't study with. I think I know who you mean.
yes,
A local
he's
local guy. I didn't study with
yeah,
that
he
guy.
was a great. Anyway, but at Ottawa U, it was Ian who told
Yeah,
me you can't stay here. You have to go to Montreal and study with Pierre Beluse at McGill,
right,
and
right.
and then
Yeah,
I said sure, I'll start my preparing for it, and then I received a letter in the mail that I was accepted at McGill,
yeah.
and then I said to Ian, what are you doing? He says, I knew you would take forever to prepare for this audition. So you remember that fellow one day was sitting in the room with the dark sunglasses,
Yeah,
just sitting there in the corner, didn't say anything. Well, that was Pierre Beluse. He was in town with the Montreal Symphony,
yeah.
and so that was your
He
audition.
was checking you out, and you passed the test.
Amazing. But
Yeah, yeah,
so we can go on and on about people like that, and part of this whole podcast that I decided to undertake is exactly that, as I had mentioned to you, is about the connecting, connecting with people, connecting with the people that will inspire you, the people who help you turn your head to look in the right direction,
yeah,
and it's about connecting the right way, and with people who will help you. And you should be, and I always tell my students, you should be making sure that you're part of the success of somebody else, and that's connecting.
yeah.
When you were studying with Ian, for example,
Yeah.
uh, apart from the study and the work, obviously, you worked really hard, and I remember seeing you perform in some bands in Ottawa before you left. You obviously did that, and then what happened?
Well, the thing I just want to reemphasize, Ian really changed my dramatically. When I started uh, studying with him, I was into Buddy Rich, and I have an audio tape of this band I was playing in just prior to that. Rob Pilch, well-known guitar player in Toronto, was also in this group. And Rob sent me a copy of this thing with, pretty recently, and so it was funny to listen to it because I was 17 years of age, and this song him and I wrote was basically a drum solo. It was a little bit ahead, and then we had a drum solo, and I thought after I'd listened to it, if I'd stayed on that path, I wouldn't have worked much because it's just it's great to listen to as a drummer, but it's not what other musicians. That stuff does not get you work playing like that. So Ian really changed my course dramatically, and I'm forever thankful because when I came to Toronto, I could play with a click effortlessly from spending hours and hours. Uh,
Right, right,
and that was a big deal, because at that time we're talking about 1979. There wasn't a lot of guys who had a versatile. Like I could play jazz, I could play rock. I was pretty versatile because I loved a lot of different kind of music. I could read from studying, and I could play with a click, and all those attributes really worked very well for me. And there wasn't a lot of guys. There was a lot of great players, but they were mostly jazz players at that point, and they couldn't play like a pop tune or a rock tune authentically. So I was lucky to fall in. Timing, as you know, is crucial, and there's a lot of luck involved in terms of just how things play out. Because you can be the best player in the world, but if you're living it in Antarctica, you're not going to get many gigs.
right.
so, so yeah, I came to Toronto. Was very fortunate to jump in the scene very quickly and working with Jimmy Dale and Doug Riley and Rob McCall and Mo Coffin and all the heavies, all the um, jazz players who dominated the studio scene that time. And there's a lot of TV variety. So I was doing the Bob McLean show like a few months after I came in. So that was great because you could actually see the band. So people saw me, right?
Right, right.
Visibility now is kind of what it's all about. And everyone's famous with YouTube. But back then, it was hard. You didn't see many people, even if they were, doing really major stuff. So I had the advantage of being visible and connected very quickly. And so, yeah, I was very fortunate to walk into it and hit it at the right time.
Yeah, and also, I mean, coming in with players who had heard about you, but you also you sub for people. You made good friends, and
Yeah,
you probably did a great job and just did what you had to do. Learning.
yeah,
I mean, getting that incredible foundation in the beginning is crucial. I mean, I remember going back to Ian Bernard in
yeah,
that first exercise of Delecluse. I think I spent 5 months on just that page,
yeah, yeah,
and the nuances, being able to control and being consistent
yeah.
with the metronome. I had never worked with a metronome before that,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I
me
had to
too.
learn to deal with that and learn how to deal with that. Of course, with Pierre Beluse, he took it to a whole other level for me.
Right.
But it was that same school of thought of that's how you
Well,
play.
the
Nuance
thing,
is important.
the thing that I realized that Ian gave me that most drum set drummers still don't get is the importance of sound. Like I remember in my very first lesson,
Yeah.
Ian said, listen to the sound you're making. I'm going, what? You know,
Yep. Yep.
as a timpanist, it's obvious, but you
Absolutely.
become very conscious of the sound you're making, slowing everything right down. So it's like, just excruciatingly obvious if you're not dead on with the click. And
Yep.
so that process, like you said, goes on for months and months and months with a 4 BPM, then you hit 42 and then 44, and you go, and it's a very, it's difficult, but it's very meditative at the same time. So you get into a deep level of understanding of basic stuff, hopefully.
Yep.
that once you have that foundation, then you can build on it. But if you never have a foundation, you're always just kind of scrambling.
Yeah. No, no. You bring up a great point, and I've always been sensitive to it, and probably because of people like Ian and certainly Pierre Belus,
Right.
where the sound, your sound, the nuance, the
Yeah.
level was, I mean, not only consistent, but it was good, and you just spent a lot of time on getting a
Yeah.
good sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your sound is your voice, and you could play a
Yeah.
million rhythms, but if you don't have the sound,
Yeah.
it's meaningless. And
Yeah.
where, if I could take it out sideways a little bit, you just made me think of something. I
Mhm.
remember when I got deep into African rhythms and we studied with this African master who we brought here with my group, repercussion. We spent three
Yeah.
months intensive and we learned the rhythms quickly, but we didn't have the sound of the instrument.
Yeah.
And then it dawned on me. I said, you could play all the rhythms in the world. You could play anything, and it was fine for you. But you listen to them right beside you,
Yeah.
and there's it's an incredible difference of sound. And it was interesting because it was like a voice. You understood every word, and
Yeah.
they made the sentences they made were audible, were meaningful, and in fact, they used to communicate in Africa that way, and it was very clear. And then I understood because I spent intensive time with this to understand the importance of the sound in that department. Clearly there's three sounds on the djembe. Well, it's those three sounds. It's a lifetime of work to get them
Yeah.
to sound authentic, not just authentic, but real and with nuance. It's not the same a slap. It's not just a slap. It's
Yeah.
the million variations of it, but they're all
Yeah.
sounding good. And so you take that same idea that a timpanist, someone who is trained on whatever level on timpani, has to go through the same thing. If you don't have the sound, you're not playing timpani. So
Yeah.
then take that to the drum set. I mean, cymbals. I mean, now I hear notes. I don't have perfect pitch, but
Yeah.
I hear the notes,
Yeah.
and everything has a note for me. And when I hear drums, if they don't sound good, I'm not happy. And I'm sure it's the
No,
same with you, right?
I talked about that probably in an interview with Bruce Whitted, like years and years ago. How the sound affects how I play, like drastically. So if I want to like sound cymbals, for example, you can change those pretty easily, and they can vary a lot. But I said basically, harsh cymbals don't work for me unless I'm going for something very specific. The same thing with the drums. Specific like thing if I'm doing it, if a project requires that kind of sound, absolutely, I'll go for that. But generally speaking, what I'm drawn to is a musical sound, which is um, whatever that means to you or me. I know what it means to me, but it's very specific in terms of the musicality that I'm looking for, and it affects my playing drastically uh, I feel a physical reaction if I don't like the sound, and I can't
Right.
relax. I can't dig it. Right? So
Right.
it's the same thing as studio. Like if you're in a good studio and the headphone is nice, is properly balanced and enough reverb so you feel relaxed. That drastically changes how you play.
Yeah.
You, know, you can't play that big open, you know, tom fill on a ballad. Drums go peep 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 peep. It's
Right.
because you will just instinctively play busier. It's to compensate.
Yeah, no, it's
So
true, and it's also, I mean, the gear you're playing or what instruments you have that you play with, if you play a certain way. If you change and play on a different drum set, a different instrument, you'll play differently, and other things will inspire you differently, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's my experience. I mean, I change when I play somebody else's kit,
yeah,
and yeah, and I always wondered about that. Why am I playing this well here, and I don't
yeah,
feel that good when I play those drums or
yeah,
that kind of setup or in a certain tuning or whatever it is. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. That's why backline. When I was on the road with Buffy St. Marie for years and years, it was always backline. And after a while, I had to figure out how to just make that conscious change and adapt to it, and not get always trying to make it something that wasn't. And after a while, I kind of embraced the difference and thought, okay, this. I actually am enjoying the difference because I would never tune my drums this way. I might sit higher than I normally would, and the cymbals are different than I would normally choose. I would consciously say, okay, I'm just going to embrace this. I'm not going to like try to fight it.
Sure.
Way more fun doing that,
Yeah,
but it is a challenge for sure, man.
yeah.
Challenge.
No, especially when you have to do it almost every single day or every single performance anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's everything. We're talking because everything changes, right? The lights, the sound, your monitoring system, the distances, everything changes. You're always having to adapt
and the room also.
Yeah, the room,
The
the
room
audience,
changes. Yeah,
the
everything.
vibe,
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about your thoughts about this whole idea of connecting. And when I say connecting, it also means people who don't stay home, they go somewhere. For example, in your case, you were in Ottawa, and then you went to Toronto and
Right.
did that. Like other people go somewhere else to New York or
Yeah.
or somewhere, and then you're connecting with other people there who make you create other connections, and it's on a personal level and also on a professional level.
Yeah.
Because some people may not understand it's not just having connections, it's just connecting with people and what you do. Even if you go to a music camp, a drum camp, or some kind of school, even you make that connection, and keeping that connection that helps people and helps yourself, helps those people discover you, which helps them. Talk a little bit about that. That's one of the things I find of interest.
Well, I think it's super important, and I've always admired people who have that innately because they were brought up in a family or a culture that encourages that. Italians, for example, I mean, to me, it's like it's such a gift if you're brought up in that warm, loving, accepting kind of environment, and you don't even think about it. I was not brought up like that, so interacting and connecting is something that I've had to consciously. I mean, when I first moved to Toronto, I would force myself to go out and hang out at George's Spaghetti House and network. It wasn't something I did easily. I know some people do. Some people just have effortless energy to connect, and I think I may be wrong, but I see you as having that, Aldo. I see you as having this effortless energy to connect, and I mean, you speak 4 languages, right? So that helps.
Yes.
That alone helps. But yeah, I think that's really a gift if you have that. If you don't have that, and I definitely didn't have that. I had to just compensate by doing what I could. The bottom line, I think, the most important thing is you have to be true to yourself. You can't force yourself to be something you're not, because first of all, you'll never be able to sustain it. And secondly, people will see through it, and you won't come across as genuine.
Sure. No, but I'm really talking about being genuine. Period. I mean, a genuine person, and never leaving that orbit. As far as I'm concerned. And if you don't know, one doesn't. I say to them, well, learn how it works. I mean, learn, because some things can be learned. It's just that some people were never exposed to it. And just the idea of helping somebody else, or just invite them for a coffee, or go and set something up, throw a party, and just to connect with people, just to being yourself, not in a phony. I mean, I always I'm a big one on just being legit, And if somebody doesn't doesn't go well with them, it's I mean it's something you have to deal with. But
Yeah.
still, if you are genuine and everything you do is genuine, nothing can happen because it's
Yeah.
you. It's you, and then you're always improving yourself as a person, as a musician,
Yeah.
because they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Eventually
I
you have to be on the bandstand with these
yeah.
people. You're in the studio and you're creating, and I mean, one of the biggest things that when I was studying at McGill, I used to go to New York every month and study. And
Right.
my original idea was I was going to move to New York and hit the studios, and that was my goal, and I was
Yeah. Sure.
seriously working at that. And I got very very lucky because I got to meet all my heroes. I was hanging out with Steve Gadd. So I was watching him in the studios, like a fly
Wow.
on the wall. He would say,
Right.
"I'm going to be at Electric Ladyland. I'm going to be at this other studio,"
Yeah.
and some of the other guys the same. When Harvey Mason would be in town, I'd cross paths, or I'd have lessons with Bernard Purdy, and the lessons I would have with Purdy would be in the studio, right? So
Yeah.
I would have the lesson before the session, and then I would stay and watch the session. So the amount of learning I did, not only in a musical context and how to deal with the situation on that level, but also the friendships that you acquire or you build because of this, and then
Yeah.
watching people amongst themselves. These were all our heroes, and I'm saying they're the most humble people in the world. So
Yeah.
it also teaches you humility, and humility is good, and
Yeah.
it's not what who it's what you do that's important. It's not who you are. Who you are is you're a human being, and everyone is pretty much in that same space, but what you do with it is important. What you
Yeah.
do with what you bring to the table is important. I mean, all of those guys, I was always in awe how simple everything was for them as humans, and they try and make any situation simple. What can I bring? What do you need? How can I help? That kind of discourse, and then that always took me. That's the connect. Making those people comfortable in the room or in the audience, in those
Yeah.
situations, right?
Oh, that's awesome, man. I actually never heard you talk about that to that detail. That's who are you studying with in general? We get one specific person, or were you
No, I would see a number of different people, and
right?
it would depend. In the beginning, there was a guy called Alan Schwartzberg, who would
Sure.
just take me around.
Yeah.
Alan was amazing drummer,
Yeah.
and with him, he would just take me around to the studios just to watch people because I wanted to see how how they worked, their interaction, what the pressure was,
Wow.
and I mean, one day I remember he said, Aldo, he called me and he said, there's Placido Domingo's in town and he's doing a record with John Denver. You remember that song, Perhaps Love,
Yeah.
that they did? So I went out to the studio, and it was all live off the floor. There was no overdubs, even the voices, and just sitting in the room and watching the process.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about humility amongst these giants, and I learned so much of how they approached it. So you listen to the original idea. John Denver would say, "Okay, here's what I'm thinking here," and 10 minutes later, they're doing a take, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you're sitting there, and Placido Domingo looks at me as during the playback. When it's over, he says, "What do you think?" And I'm, and so in my mind, I'm saying, "I can't believe." And he was serious. He says, "What do you think?"
Yeah.
And the only thing that came to my mind was, I mean, of course, I was like floating in my chair because it was so beautiful and it was so great, and there was just the fact of doing the first take was amazing. And I looked at him and I pulled up the hair on my arms and I said, "Well, my hair is standing on end. That's what I think." He says, I appreciate that. Yeah. And then they said, well, I have an idea. Can we do just one more? So
Yeah,
they did another take. I'm not sure
yeah,
which one they kept, but for me, that was the record, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
And just I went to see all kinds of people because I studied also at the original drummers collective. I mean, and Kenwood Denard was there. I studied with him.
Right.
I studied with everybody I can get my hands on, just to learn. And Dave Samuels on marimba, and then of course all of those people. David Charles was a percussionist who did a lot of
Okay.
studio work.
Yeah.
So I went to see him for all the triangles and all the shakers and all of that, because I was developing also that side of things, how to play studio percussion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted to know it all, and seeing these guys in action, really was a school in itself. And I would go every month to study, and then I would spend summers going to camps,
Yeah.
and left, right, and center. I mean, it was crazy because they used to call me Mr. Sub. I used to work a lot, except all my
Yeah.
subs worked more than me because I would just send them, So I had a lot of friends, So
Yeah.
there's a in this theme of connecting with
Yeah.
all of these people who helped me out by subbing, and also whoever I was working with accepted the fact that I might be gone for 3 weeks here, 2 weeks there,
Yeah.
and connecting with people who respect that and will allow you to do that, and then connecting with all those people in New York who taught me so much, and not just from a music point of view, but also your place in the world, in this world, the community, the music world also.
Yeah.
And we would run into people. Or I remember doing sessions back here where people would take themselves so seriously, that they didn't really take what they were doing seriously, and it was really
That's a bad combo.
oh, that was interesting because
That's not a good combo.
no, not at all. And it's funny because some of these
So,
people
oh
who
my
would
God.
come back from LA, one guy, I won't mention his name, and I remember this one session. It was a jingle. It was quick in and out. We do it the last punch. There's the hole where they probably said the words, and then the punch in the end. And somebody was off, and we're all sitting there. It was great take, and nobody's saying, let's do that again. That was me.
Yeah.
And I, in my mind, I said, I said to myself, I don't think it was me. So I'm thinking, I said, can we play that again?
Yeah.
And then this one musician said, oh, it's the drums. So, and I
Under the
said,
bus. Under the bus you go.
yeah, so the end of career. And so I said, I mean, nothing's impossible. It could have been. I said, do you mind putting it quickly? I don't want to waste anybody's time. If it's me, I'll do it again. I'll just sit here, just do the track back. I can punch that in really fast. So what happened was, all of a sudden the leader in the thing, he knew, and he said, "Let me hear this instrument with that and with the click." And it was the person who spoke was the guy who was off,
Right.
who the guy who said it's the drums.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice guy.
Well, yeah. I mean, he had developed a bit of an attitude, and he was a great player, but
Yeah.
he didn't have this other thing where we walk in and we want to make sure that this thing works, and that's what we're thinking, right? But some people don't have that. They're not there for that purpose. They're there to show how good they are, and they are good. But
Yeah. Yeah.
we are human, and some of us make more mistakes than others.
Well, it's funny. That reminds me of a session I did in LA with Michael O'Mardian was producing. My ex-wife, she was an artist, and we're doing this song, and that's one of the best sessions I've ever done. And when you work with great people, more often than not, occasionally there's exceptions, but great people are the most they're the easiest to work with. They're humble. They just get it, right? Lesser people, from my experience, and the more insecure you are, the more you're going to do stuff like that, throw somebody under the bus who's you go into this technical mode that doesn't do anybody any good.
Right.
Well, Martin had his own studio, great studio, and great engineer, and we set up and him and I jammed for about 20 minutes.
Nice. Nice.
Because he's a player first, and he gets it. You warm up, you get your sounds, you get comfortable, and then roll the take. And we got the take very quickly, and it sounded great. He was happy, I was happy, But that's the way it should be. But that's really the difference between working with great people, get it on every level. And then we went to lunch for 2 hours.
You weren't in Italy, right?
He's going,
I'm just kidding.
Okay,
Yeah.
we got the song in place. That's great. Now the important thing is lunch, and we sat down, had an amazing meal. It was back in the day when record budgets were unlimited, and
Yes.
and highest level and everything. So that was quite an eye opener. But yeah, just playing. I mean, drums were supplied by the drum doctor, and set up, sounded impeccable. Sound was just, it was just everything,
Yeah.
And it's so easy when you're working like that. And he was such a cool guy, He just like really a great player, icon, played with Steely Dan and
Right.
everything. But it was a great reminder of how easy it can be working with people, But yeah, the personal thing was it's almost more important. It used to be the other. When I was younger, I used to put so much emphasis on the playing, thinking playing comes first, and everything else comes second. And I've almost gone the other way now, where the hang and the chemistry, because it boils down to people, like you're saying, the connection
Exactly.
is really where it's at, And the greatest players in the world, like Dad, always talk about the music first.
Of course.
You have to be serving a higher power. Like, if you're just in it for yourself, it's never going to last. You won't last. Nothing will last because we're all listening together is really more obvious than ever by
Yep.
the world we're living in. So, yeah, I think that's a fantastic lesson, and you teach it by example. Like you learned it by hanging with people.
Exactly.
I mean, that's so amazing, man.
Yeah.
It's like Elvin Jones talks about. Some guy comes in for a lesson and he says, "Okay, I teach, but I'm going to get your table right beside my hi-hat, and you can sit there for a month."
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, you absorb everything you need to anyway.
Yeah. No. And you're so right about this. And it goes, to me, it goes further. When I say, make sure you're part of somebody else's success, this goes, in the personal, in the session, in the tour, in the song, because as you're playing, if you're not, and I keep coming back to this word connecting. If you're not connecting with an audience, if you're not connecting with the players, the music you're making is not, I mean, those notes are not touching each other, and they're not touching where they're supposed to go, and that they're not saying the message. So you really have to think of this thing as an outside force that you are the creator of, that you are in charge of, or the director for that moment. And if it's going in a different direction, then not in that community or to that person where it really matters.
Yeah.
And it really it may not be able to put your finger on it, but you know when it works and when it doesn't. Like I mean, your experience that you just said, and I had, many like that. With all of these guys, and of course, you say to yourself, who am I? And I'm sure they say that to themselves as well. Like, who am I when this person? And I've seen it in those circumstances. And, they're all not trying to up each other. They're all trying to say, you are the guy, the reason I started this. And the other one says, no, you're the reason why. And it's really paying homage to that, connecting to the humanity, and those
Yeah.
people who really did it for you.
Yeah.
And even if you didn't know, if they didn't know, I should say, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an inspiration, and somebody's just um, making sure that you're okay before anything else. And what you do it seriously. It's like when a carpenter comes to your house and you need that door frame fixed. He doesn't come in and say, "I have the biggest tools on the planet and I'm the best carpenter." He comes in, he or she comes in, fixes this thing, and they really love what they do, and they do
Yeah.
it so well for you. And of course, they get paid. But
Yeah.
the whole thing is you have this thing to resolve. That to me that's clear, and they fix it and they do it right. They didn't use cheap wood. They didn't cut corners. They did it
Yeah.
right, and they're great carpenters.
And that's
But
what people are. That connection is what really makes the impact. That lasts.
yes,
The superficial stuff is all well and good, but if you make a connection with someone, uh, that can last for a lifetime.
yeah,
And do it over that. So it's better to make a good impression.
that's right. And honestly, is it that difficult? It really isn't. And I think it's the difference between taking what you do seriously, but not taking yourself seriously. I mean, you are fortunate to have this talent or be crazy enough to do this, right? But
Crazy indeed.
yes, but what you
Yeah.
do is the most important for the purpose. I mean, if you're there for somebody else's thing, then that's what you do, and make sure that they're okay and they're happy. And
Yeah.
when I learned that so long ago that it really carried with me. And I was born in a village. I was an immigrant. I've always had that kind of underdog. I never thought myself superior to anything because I always had to keep quiet, and do and be invisible and just make sure everything was okay and that I got through with that. But you carry that into how do you bring something to the situation where it looks like nothing happened, but a lot happened, and it was those people who made it happen because they brought what they brought to the table.
I totally agree. Let me just pivot here for 1 second back to where we started, because I want to ask you a question
Yep.
about sound. And I think I know how I feel about this. I'm curious about how you feel. When you hit a drum with a stick, obviously the sound is variable. 10 different guys will sit down and play a drum set with sticks, and it'll sound different.
Yep.
When you play a hand drum, I feel that that's even way more intimate. Like the amount of nuance and timbre, the variety of sound with a hand drum. Like you said, a slap is a slap, but there's a million slaps within that.
Oh yeah, and it's
Within
huge
the language.
because no, I know what you mean, and it becomes more like more direct because there's nothing between you
Yeah.
and that instrument. The
Yeah,
way you
it's like
strike, it's
more intimate, because
Yeah.
you're skin on skin, basically.
skin
or
on skin,
yeah,
and the way you strike it, the way you position, it affects everything. Absolutely, and it's huge. It takes a long time to figure that out. Why are some people have such great sounds? I mean, Giovanni Hidalgo has probably his hands are half my size, my hands.
right. Yeah,
Very small hands, right?
Yeah.
It's an incredible sound. So it has nothing to do with the size of your hands or the length of your fingers.
Yeah.
Especially on the hand drums, congas, djembes, or even frame drums are all about the striking, and that takes a long time to have a really good sound.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
you.
we were talking about the importance of sound in your microphone. How
Yep.
you connect, the sound of your voice affects how you connect with people.
That's true,
Again.
but it's interesting because you never know what you sound like until you hear yourself back, And then, of course, you don't believe it because you said, that's not me, because you hear yourself differently from the inside.
Yeah.
And that's, some people have great big voices, others have thin voices, but you don't know until you hear it back recorded.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah.
so
But
you're always working on that, but you have a microphone that when there is a microphone, you can project a bigger sound and you can mess with that
well,
electronically.
absolutely. That's why we're so lucky to get in the studio when we were younger, really young, because that changed my playing dramatically. When I heard back the first time, like what works, what doesn't, everything becomes simpler and more intensive, because that's what works, generally speaking.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
when you realize how important that is, and when I play live, I still think of it the same way. Like I think as a producer, like if I'm listening back to it, what's the sound like? That's my default setting,
yeah,
is to just because of so many thousands of hours listening back and going, okay, it just becomes like a default position to just always make what you can play, whatever that is, within your capabilities, and to make the simplest, most musical, effective thing you can play,
yeah,
as opposed to hoping for the best, or just not being aware. I think a lot of the great players in Toronto, for example, who never have done much studio work, they're still very talented people, but they don't play from that place, and generally they play way too much. It doesn't translate.
yeah. No, that's a great point, and I will always remember my experience, and I'm sure you must remember your very first time. What happened in your mind when you heard yourself back in the studio?
Mhm.
First of all, like that it sounded that big and that great, and you could hear every little thing that you did. And I remember hearing it when I heard that the first time. I was totally flabbergasted, and then I was listening to what I was doing. And the second time we played, of course, I changed half the stuff I was doing because I said that doesn't work. All of a sudden you're hearing it from the
Yeah,
front, and big in the studio. That was an incredible lesson when
yeah, yeah,
and I was a teenager, maybe 15 or 16 when that happened.
yeah,
I just couldn't believe that. And then when people would talk about that you have to play differently, you have to orchestrate, and then you start, understanding, you start analyzing other people. To this day, I mean, for example, if you analyze Ringo Starr in those
yeah.
parts in the Beatles, to me,
Yeah.
that was probably one of the ultimate. One of the ultimate. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but every day,
You are definitely not the only one. Ringo is one of those sad stories where the butt of so many jokes, and
yes,
the irony is he's brilliant. He's a perfect. He is the absolute perfect drummer for that band,
yeah,
the Beatles. You know,
yeah.
the greatest bands that have ever
And,
lived.
if you change anything of the songs of the groove,
Yeah,
it's not the song. It's like changing the words,
yeah, yeah.
and it's brilliant to have come up with those parts. Unbelievable. I mean,
I know.
we can go on and on, and
Yeah, yeah.
I would have these conversations with Greg Bisonet
Right, right.
about it. Yeah, because there's this one song that I always thought was a certain way. Get dun 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 diddly dun, that famous
Well,
one.
yeah,
And I thought that he was going down. He said, no, no, no. Ringo plays it up and ends with his left hand, being left-handed, and leads with
yeah,
his
yeah.
left. And then when he said that, I said, wow, all those years I did it always wrong. And when you do it his way, it makes total sense to the
Right.
song. I mean,
Yeah,
that's brilliance of orchestration and sound and putting notes in the right place. Not more, not less.
yeah.
Amazing.
But you're right. Those parts become uh, part of the song. Like you can't change it.
Isn't that funny?
Ironically, he played that way because he's left-handed, so he leads with his left, even though he's a right-handed kid.
Yes.
So it was just meant to be, man. So,
That's, yeah. Talk about connecting. I mean, connecting with people in the music. And I mean, I've been connected with you for many years, and every once in a while we cross paths, whether
Yeah.
it's here or in Cuba when we can. Yeah.
Yeah. Cuba.
And anyway, but we'll have to pick this up another time.
Okay,
Kevin,
man.
I thank you so much for doing this. You're
My pleasure. Yeah, it was great.
to be
And
continued.
I learned some new stuff about you, Aldo. It's always
I,
good.
you know,
I really like
sometimes I think I had 20 lives. It's some of the things that I did at places I went to.
Yeah.
I mean, you just reminded me of another one. I was at somebody asked me to do I was doing something, I forget where now, and I was helping somebody, and I was playing congas, and Phil Wilson walks in the room, and he says, "What are you doing tonight?" I'm saying, "I'm catching your big band." He says, "Come to the rehearsal," you know, because I was helping somebody, and I was invited to the rehearsal, and they recorded that night. So I ended up on this album that he was producing that night live, called Live
Wow.
and Cooking. And and I'm saying, had I not been there, I would
Yeah.
have never had that opportunity. And Steve
Yeah.
Rodby was the bass player in this thing from Pat
Oh, wow.
Metheny's band. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all about then what you do with it. It's also another thing, but just connecting and being helpful and being getting out and being there.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, at COSA we do that all the time. We connect, people playing with people, and saying,
Yeah.
check this out. I mean, like Mark Juliana, when he was a student at COSA for a couple of years at the camps, and he connected with John Riley, and then studied with him and studied with other people, and then that developed. So it's all this connection that takes you somewhere else.
Well, you have perspective because you've been in it for a lifetime now, so you get it, and that's so invaluable to impart to younger generations because
Yep.
that's
Yeah, and that's probably one of the challenges in the online stuff. As much as I love the online, is you're not in the room necessarily, and you there's a part of it, a piece missing that we've always had,
Yep.
and that's it's going to go somewhere else. I mean, virtual reality. I mean, we'll be our own avatars. We'll send them to do things and do the connecting. just be helpful, okay?
yeah.
Anyway, so thank you so much again, and as I
Yeah, my
say,
pleasure.
to be continued, Kevin. Thank you,
Continue. All right, man. Cheers.
Kevan McKenzie. Ciao.
Hi, Alan. Cheers.